And I have no regrets.
So when I saw this moment, I was just thinking about myself and a lot of emotions and grieving that I have experienced and all the emotions that I've shared with you guys and the anger that I have felt. And I want to be very clear that I am not that example that she is giving. I could have never, and I know that so many people agree with this, I could have never forgiven Tyler Robinson for whatever part he played in this. And obviously I'm saying whatever part he played in this because I don't believe that he was the lone person involved. I don't even think he's the person that killed Charlie Kirk. But even if you believe all of those things, I never could have turned around and forgiving him that quickly, right?
Nobody would have anything to say about it if you were grieving with your 2 fatherless children at home, but you thrust yourself into the center of it after 3 days. That's a whole different story.
JD Grabass comforted leather pants-clad widow Erika Kirk, and their embrace had tongues wagging all over the internet. For my money, though, it wasn't the embrace. It wasn't how he grabbed her around the waist as she ran her fingers through his hair. Instead, for me, it was this swagger. Look at that, JD. I mean, that is swagger. That is like Scarface confidence.
Candace Owens begins by insisting that everything about the situation feels profoundly wrong. She does not say this lightly, nor as someone looking from the outside. Instead, she emphasizes that her understanding runs far deeper than most people's, because she once helped build the very organization now shrouded in confusion. That insider experience, according to her, makes her uniquely qualified to distinguish what counts as normal internal behavior and what crosses into the territory of orchestration, manipulation, or outright deception.
She believes that they have caught the true killer of Charlie Kirk, right? Do you believe that? The person that we have in custody, is that the person that pulled the trigger? Is that the only person that pulled the trigger? Anyways, I want you to hear it directly from her and not me recapping what she said or reiterating it. Rather, it's gone viral because of what she didn't say, to be honest with you. Take a listen.
Do you think they've caught your husband's killer?
So, something I'm so grateful for is that we have one of the most incredible teams to have seen the autopsy report, to have seen the different evidence portions that have been collected. I trust our team.
She explains this calmly, yet with unmistakable conviction, as if the weight of what she knows has become impossible to ignore. From the moment she starts speaking, Candace makes it clear that the story people are being shown is only the surface layer of something much larger. She argues that Erika Kirk's sudden rise into the spotlight was not something organic or surprising, but something that feels calculated.
And I think it's very cynical the way that she's being pushed into the center. And I said it last night, the reason they're doing that is because it's like atrocity propaganda. Who can ever criticize a grieving widow? She's a victim, you know? She's a victim of a horrible tragedy, and so that makes her beyond criticism, so they're pushing her in the middle of this, and I see people saying she should run for president now. And I think that's very sneaky. I think that's very sneaky, and I think it's kind of evil, actually, the way that they seem to be leveraging the tragedy to create this political breakout moment.
What the true answers are, and I think that's why this is going viral, because they're going, okay, does she actually believe that Tyler Robinson acted alone? And obviously Jesse is not going to push her on that, because it would have probably felt more like an interrogation rather than just sitting down and speaking through some of these topics that are probably hard to talk about in general. But I am hopeful that what she's implying is that she trusts her team to do the due diligence. She says that she has seen the autopsy report. She has seen certain things. Obviously, none of us have seen the autopsy report. And I don't know. I didn't know what to make of that. Is she saying that there's more that's going to come out? Is that kind of a foreshadowing that more is going to come out and things are going to be clear? I hope so. I really do. Because in terms of what the public has seen so far, I would say nothing has been convincing. And I'm trying to imagine what they would have that the public hasn't seen that could be sort of a smoking gun. And in theory, it would be the footage.
In Candace's view, the timing, the presentation, and the precision of Erika's public appearances all suggest a placement rather than a reaction, a role assigned, not a role earned. Candace then reflects on details that many people might dismiss as mundane, but that she sees as revealing. She mentions that Carly wrote letters to Charlie every week, specifically every Saturday letters, that Charlie would receive right before turning off his phone for the Sabbath. She paints an almost cinematic image of Charlie walking into his kitchen, opening the familiar junk drawer that every household possesses, murmuring Shabbat Shalom, placing his phone inside and closing the drawer to symbolically disconnect himself from the world. To Candace, this scene does not simply illustrate a man honoring a ritual. It reveals a pattern of behavior that seems heavily shaped and perhaps even influenced by people around him in ways that now feel suspicious. When Candace sees Erika smiling while recounting sensitive details, she interprets it as more evidence that Erika knew far more than the public was being told. She points to the way Erika delivers statements with controlled calmness, as if rehearsed. She even references the story about the 12 Israeli phones that Candace had previously mentioned, a detail that she believes ties together the broader pattern she has been warning people about. In her telling, nothing feels random. Every small clue is part of a chain. Candace insists that Erika was strategically inserted into Charlie's position to ensure that a specific ideological agenda, one she calls pro-Zionist propaganda, would continue even after Charlie began distancing himself from it. She says plainly that Charlie had started turning his back on that direction in the final months of his life, and that this shift made him a threat to the individuals who wanted Turning Point USA to remain aligned with a particular set of interests. According to Candace, Charlie's death did not silence controversy. Instead, it validated his warnings. She points out that not long after Charlie passed, the organization featured Ben Shapiro on his show, A Sign. She argues that the leadership had already accepted and embraced the ideological forces. Charlie himself was resisting. To Candace, the smiles on their faces during those appearances were not expressions of mourning or unity, but the visible discomfort of individuals who knew something had gone terribly wrong, yet chose to maintain the facade. Candace recalls a news segment in which a host asks whether there is an investigation into a wider plot. She watches as the guest on the show calmly states that the administration and the Attorney General have poured significant resources into an important investigation. Candace highlights this moment as a flashing signal that something much bigger is occurring behind the scenes, even if it is not being openly discussed. The government's involvement, in her view, does not indicate transparency, it indicates containment. She then questions Erika's televised performance of grief. Candace scrutinizes everything, from Erika's heavily done makeup to the absence of any mascara streaks despite her sobbing. To Candace, this is not grief, but method, acting a kind of performance designed for sympathetic viewership rather than emotional honesty. She finds it suspicious that Erika emphasizes repeatedly that Charlie pursued her, and not the other way around, as if this detail is desperately important to the narrative she wants to protect. Meanwhile, Candace's own videos and posts begin circulating widely. Clips of her raising questions about the circumstances of Charlie's passing spread across social media, capturing millions of views. What started as a personal doubt transforms into a national conversation. Candace argues that the story is filled with inconsistencies, a 10-second phone call that reveals nothing, a timeline that does not hold together, an event that was confirmed unusually fast even though it had been requested unusually late. Candace's frustration grows most when she considers how quickly the individuals transporting Charlie reached the hospital. According to her calculations based on public accounts, they arrived within roughly 25 minutes, a time frame she claims suggests that they already knew exactly where they were going. She questions how a hospital could be placed on lockdown so swiftly, why only certain people were let through, and why obvious evidence like call logs or security footage has not been openly shared. To Candace, transparency should have been immediate, yet instead she sees silence, selective information, and a disturbing eagerness to move forward without addressing unresolved questions. In her narration, the story transforms from a tragedy into a puzzle with missing pieces. Candace points to erased details, conflicting witness accounts, and the eerie quietness surrounding federal involvement. Social media begins echoing her concerns, turning suspicion into momentum. Online discussions shift away from mourning and toward investigation. People who once accepted the surface explanation now feel compelled to re-examine the events with fresh skepticism. Finally, Candace turns her attention back to Erika. She describes Erika's background as a former reality television figure, a model, and someone comfortable in front of cameras. She suggests that Erika stepped into the spotlight too easily, too quickly, almost as though she had been prepared for this moment long before it arrived. Candace claims that enormous sums of money, described in both dollars and foreign currency, began flowing through the organization after Charlie's passing, benefiting those who, in her words, are invested in maintaining a particular version of the story. Candace portrays the entire situation as a carefully choreographed production. In her view, Erika is not simply a widow. She is the lead actor in a role she was already prepared to play. Every interview, every tear, every carefully chosen phrase feels to Candace like another scripted scene in a narrative designed to replace the truth rather than reveal it. Candace Owens continues by stressing that the deeper she looks, the more the pieces of the story fail to fit together. She says that if people could see what she has seen, the internal communications, the sudden shifts in behavior, the unnerving uniformity in the organization's public messaging, they would understand why she refuses to accept the version of events being presented. To her, the official narrative feels like a polished veneer hiding a far more troubling reality. And as she continues speaking, her tone shifts from frustration to something closer to resolve, like someone who has accepted that the truth will not reveal itself unless she forces it into the light. She brings attention to the days leading up to Charlie's final Shabbat. According to Candace, there were warnings quiet, subtle, but noticeable to anyone who had spent years paying attention to the rhythms of his life. Charlie was pulling away from people who had once been central to his inner circle. He was canceling meetings, ignoring messages, and vocalizing concerns about individuals he believed were trying to control the ideological direction of the organization. Candace insists that these were not signs of stress or exhaustion, but signs of someone attempting to break free from a coordinated machine. Candace mentions conversations she had with Charlie months before his passing, moments where he questioned whether the organization had drifted from its original mission. She remembers him saying that Turning Point USA was becoming less about empowering young Americans and more about serving political interests that had nothing to do with freedom or conservatism. Each time he expressed these doubts, Candace now realizes someone else in the organization would swoop in to reassure him, redirect him, or push him back into the script that others wanted him to follow. Those interactions seem far more sinister in hindsight. She then shifts her focus back to Erika. Candace describes how Erika's public persona appeared suddenly refined, as if someone had been coaching her for weeks. Her hair, makeup, and staging were always impeccable. even in interviews allegedly recorded during the height of her grief. Candace finds it striking that Erika repeatedly positions herself as the center of the tragedy, always returning to the idea that Charlie had chosen her, pursued her, loved her instantly. The repetition of that narrative point, Candace argues, feels less like genuine emotion and more like an attempt to preemptively disarm anyone who might question the authenticity of their relationship. Candace notes how quickly the organization rallied around Erika. She says that within mere hours, not days, Erika had been positioned as the core emotional figure of the tragedy. In Candace's telling, not a single voice within the organization suggested waiting, pausing, or reflecting before pushing Erika into the spotlight. Instead, they moved with astonishing speed, almost choreographed efficiency, promoting her statements, her interviews, her image. Candace believes that the reason for this urgency was simple. Erika was their chosen spokesperson, and her story was the one they needed the public to believe. She revisits the logistical inconsistencies that began multiplying immediately after Charlie's death. The 10-second phone call that conveyed no real information, the extremely rapid hospital lockdown that seemed almost instantaneous, the conflicting accounts of who notified whom, when, and how. Candace insists that these discrepancies are not coincidences, but symptoms of a narrative that was arranged before the public ever learned what had happened. She also questions why certain witnesses were allowed inside the hospital while others were kept outside, despite being closer to Charlie and more knowledgeable about his personal routines. To Candace, the selective access reveals a decision one orchestrated by people who wanted only specific individuals controlling the flow of information. That level of control, she argues, only happens when something has already gone wrong. Candace also brings up financial questions that she believes have been intentionally buried. She claims that shortly after Charlie's passing, donations surged in amounts that were unprecedented. Money poured in from sources that had previously shown little interest in Turning Point USA operations. She finds it suspicious that the largest contributions came from wealthy individuals and organizations aligned with the ideological agenda Charlie had been resisting. According to Candace, these donations were not a gesture of mourning, they were investments in maintaining influence. She then points to the bizarre timing of Erika's media tour. Instead of stepping away from public view to grieve, Erika appeared on national television, magazine covers, and lengthy interviews, all within the first 2 weeks. Candace emphasizes that grieving spouses rarely seek that level of visibility so soon. The speed at which Erika embraced the spotlight, in Candace's view, is more reminiscent of a public relations rollout than mourning. Candace also finds it suspicious that high-profile figures within the movement immediately treated Erika as if she were an authoritative voice on Charlie's legacy. She had not worked beside him, had not built the organization with him, and had not been part of the internal operations. Yet suddenly, she was speaking on behalf of Turning Point USA Future, as though she had inherited not only Charlie's grief, but also his position. Candace argues that this transition was not natural. It was facilitated, encouraged, and strategically amplified. Candace recalls watching Erika answer a question about whether Charlie ever expressed fear or concern before his death. In that moment, Candace noticed the slightest hesitation, a flicker in Erika's expression, before Erika settled into her rehearsed tone. She responded that Charlie had been completely fine, entirely calm, and had never indicated that anything was wrong. That certainty, Candace argues, is suspicious. People under stress, facing ideological conflict, or sensing betrayal do not typically hide everything from the person they love most. Candace believes Erika's answer was less about truth, and more about maintaining a narrative in which nothing suspicious occurred. She also points to the absence of basic transparency. no release of full call logs, no full timeline from the hospital, no unedited footage from security cameras, no independent review of the circumstances. Instead, she sees a public relations wall, every inquiry met with vague statements, each detail overshadowed by the emotional storytelling surrounding Erika's widowhood. Candace argues that when truth is clear, institutions rush to share it. When it is not, they rush to shield it. Toward the end of the section, Candace's tone hardens. She says that what troubles her most is not the unanswered questions, nor even the inconsistencies, but the way the people around Charlie seem desperate to move on. Any attempt to dig deeper is dismissed as disrespect, conspiracy, or insensitivity. Candace believes this is a tactic, a way to silence anyone who might challenge the officially approved story. But she refuses to be silenced. She says that she owes Charlie more than quiet compliance. She owes him honesty, even if that honesty makes powerful people uncomfortable. And she insists that she will keep unraveling every thread, every detail, every inconsistency until the truth, the real truth, is impossible to deny. Candace Owens begins the final section by explaining that the moment she started speaking publicly, she expected resistance, but she did not expect the full force of coordinated suppression that came crashing down on her. She recounts how almost instantly, social media platforms began limiting her reach. Mainstream outlets framed her questions as dangerous, and individuals who had once called her a friend suddenly acted as if her concerns were unfounded or hysterical. Candace says she recognizes this pattern all too well. It is the same strategy used whenever someone gets too close to revealing something powerful institutions would rather keep hidden. She reminds her audience that she has been in political media long enough to know the difference between organic criticism and orchestrated pushback. Organic criticism is messy, unpredictable, emotional. The response she received, however, was cold, synchronized, and strangely uniform. Every talking point repeated across different platforms by people who typically never agree on anything. Candace insists that this is the hallmark of a narrative being protected, not a truth being clarified. She then turns back to the people inside the organization. Candace recalls how, in the early days after Charlie's passing, she reached out privately to old colleagues to ask simple questions any reasonable person would expect to be answered in the wake of such a tragedy. Instead, she was met with nervous laughter, rehearsed lines, or abrupt dismissals. Some individuals simply refused to respond at all. This silence, she argues, speaks volumes. Candace believes fear had spread through the ranks, fear not of her, but of the repercussions that came with telling the truth. She describes the emotional toll of watching an organization she once helped shape transform into something unrecognizable. The people who had built their careers on advocating for transparency suddenly clung to secrecy. Those who claimed to champion free speech now treated basic inquiry as betrayal. Candace says it is deeply painful to witness the erosion of principles she once fought alongside them to defend. But she refuses to allow that pain to silence her. Candace moves on to describe the mounting inconsistencies that emerged as more information trickled out. She talks about the contradictory statements surrounding the condition in which Charlie was found, the shifting storylines about who arrived first, and the vague explanations surrounding the missing timestamps. Every time one discrepancy was exposed, another emerged in its place. To Candace, this pattern resembles a house of cards, one that can only stand as long as people refuse to examine its foundation. She brings attention again to Erika's rapid involvement in the organization and the public sphere. Candace emphasizes that grief-stricken spouses rarely dive into political positioning within days. Yet Erika was on every major platform, articulating policy sentiments, speaking as if she had inherited not only Charlie's legacy, but also his ideological authority. Candace finds it deeply troubling that people accepted this new power structure without question. She sees it as a form of narrative engineering, a way to redirect Charlie's influence toward goals he had been distancing himself from. Candace explains that this redirection becomes even more obvious when one examines the timing of high-profile endorsements, donations, and international statements that began flowing into the organization immediately after Charlie's death. What she finds suspicious is that many of these supporters had previously criticized Charlie's shift away from certain geopolitical positions in the months before he passed. Candace asks her audience to consider why those same individuals suddenly showered the organization with praise and funding once Erika became the public face. She argues that the simplest explanation is often the one people are most afraid to consider. Influence was shifting, and Charlie had become an obstacle to certain agendas. Candace says she believes that powerful individuals were determined to maintain their control over the direction of the organization, and that Charlie's new concerns, doubts, and ideological changes threatened that control. Candace then shifts her focus to the emotional manipulation she believes is being weaponized against the public. She notes that every time a new question arises, defenders of the official narrative respond not with evidence, but with moral condemnation. Candace highlights how people are told to respect Erika's grief, honor Charlie's memory, and avoid conspiracies. Yet not one of these emotional demands actually addresses the factual contradictions at hand. Instead, they serve as shields, tools used to shut down inquiry by framing curiosity as cruelty. She argues that grief should never be used as a barrier to truth. If anything, true grief demands answers.
That have been collected.
True love demands clarity.
I trust her.
And true loyalty demands courage. Candace insists that hiding behind emotional gatekeeping is not a sign of respect. It is a sign of fear that the truth, once uncovered, will dismantle the carefully constructed narrative. Candace then tells her audience that she has reviewed more documents, timelines, and internal communications than she has publicly revealed so far. She says she is not releasing everything at once because she understands the gravity of what she is alleging. She wants to be responsible, she wants to be thorough, and she wants to ensure that when the full truth comes out, it is undeniable, irrefutable, and impossible to dismiss as speculation. She reflects on the personal cost of speaking out. Friends have distanced themselves. Colleagues have turned cold. Even some conservative commentators, individuals who built their careers questioning authority, are now chastising her for doing exactly that. But Candace makes it clear that she has never been motivated by popularity. She is motivated by principle, and principle requires standing alone when necessary. In the final stretch, Candace turns directly to her audience. She tells them that they are witnessing a moment when truth and narrative have become adversaries. The truth is messy, uncomfortable, and often inconvenient. Narratives, on the other hand, are polished, comforting, and easy to consume. But Candace warns that comfort is dangerous when it blinds people to manipulation. She urges her audience to keep questioning, to keep paying attention, and to refuse to let emotional storytelling replace factual transparency. She reminds them that every major cover-up in modern history began with the public being told not to ask questions. Those who asked were shamed, silenced, or ridiculed until eventually the truth emerged, proving they were right all along. Candace ends by saying that she will not stop. She will continue exposing inconsistencies, highlighting contradictions, and revealing the details that others want buried. She knows the risks, but she also knows that silence is complicity. And she refuses to be complicit in burying a man she respected, a friend she trusted, and a story that deserves far more scrutiny than it has received. She closes with a simple but powerful message that the truth, no matter how long it takes, has a way of rising. And she intends to be there when it does.